Fellas, UFC 313 is happening this week, and I'm going to run through the card and show you all my picks. Alright, so jumping straight into it, the first fight of the night and jumping off the early prelims is Jordon Santos versus Ozzy Diaz. Now, Jordon Santos' most recent win was in the Contender Series. He fought Will Curry and beat him by decision, and it was a pretty good win. It was a striking battle for 3 whole rounds, and all 3 of them, I think he sort of outmatched Will Curry when it came to striking. He just landed more, he threw more, he was just putting on the pressure consistently, and Ozzy Diaz's opponent, I mean, his most recent fight, he got finished by Ming Yang Zhang, which I don't think is too much of a loss. Ming Yang Zhang is very good, but you know, he did show flaws on the feet, and even in the Contender Series when he fought Joe Pyfer, he got knocked out there as well. So, you know, I don't think he's shown much real promise, especially with his striking, and I think that Jordon Santos is going to find these openings, and I don't think he's going to knock him out. I think it's going to go decision, so my pick will be Jordon Santos by a decision win. And closing out the early prelims, we have Marion Santos versus Francis Marshall. Inherently, Santoses are running the early prelims, so Marion Santos knocked out Kuniev. I think that was his most recent win, and that was a pretty dominant win. That was a very good knockout as well, put him out very much cold, and in that fight he showed some amazing striking, and I think we've come to know recently that Kuniev is not really a pushover when it comes to the striking department, and he looked really good. On the other hand, Francis Marshall, his last win was a split decision, which, you know, nothing really happened that fight, so it wasn't really an amazing performance. And then before that, he got knocked out by Bulgarian, and then before that, lost to Gomez. I just don't think he's really... I think he's on a bit of a skid right now, and I don't think he has what it takes to sort of take out Marion Santos. So I'm going to pick Marion Santos, and I think he's going to do it by a late fight KO. We'll go for a round 3 KO by Marion Santos. Alright, so moving on to the prelims now, and opening the prelims is Alex Morono versus Carlos Leal. So Alex Morono I've been less than impressed with recently. His most recent fight, he lost a split decision to Daniel Rodriguez, but I think Daniel Rodriguez did enough to win. He also lost at 302 to Nico Price in one of the most sort of underwhelming, boring fights I've seen in a while. He beat Court McGee and Tim Means, but I don't really value those wins because they both, you know, are sort of on their way out. In fact, I think Court McGee's already retired, so yeah. And, you know, he lost to Ponzinibbio. He loses to really anyone who sort of has good striking, and I can very much see Carlos Leal beating him. Carlos Leal, his last fight, he lost to Renat Frekretnov, which I don't think is that bad of a loss considering it was a split decision, and a lot of people say he actually won, so yeah, I could have seen it go either way. I did actually think Carlos Leal won, but when Frekretnov won, I wasn't too confused by that. But either way, I think Carlos Leal's most recent performance really shows promise, and I think he's going to beat Alex Morono, and I think that's going to be by a decision. Alright, so next up on the prelims we have Bruno Ferreira versus Armen Petrosyan. Now, Armen Petrosyan has shown a lot of promise. A lot of people thought when the fight was announced that Shara Bullet was going to wipe the floor with him. And when the fight actually happened, I mean, I had him winning both the rounds prior to being finished by that spinning back elbow, well, spinning double back elbow. But I think he was winning both those rounds there, and to sort of stand and bang with Shara Bullet, that means that you're decent at striking. But the problem with Armen Petrosyan here is his patience. He was waiting for these shots, sort of not really firing off the jab until he knew it was going to land with Shara. If he tries to implement that with Bruno Ferreira, I could very much picture Bruno Ferreira blitzing in or looking for a counter and hitting him with something very, very heavy. Bruno Ferreira has freakish strength. I mean, he has a lot of power for his division, and he has a lot of first round finishes, and I think he's going to sort of bring that same energy into this fight. So my pick for this fight will be Bruno Ferreira by a round 1 knockout. Alright, so next fight on the card is Joshua Van versus Rei Tsuruya. Joshua Van has been on some pretty good wins recently. He got a pretty good win over Cody Djordan, and then he also had that really fun fight at the Sphere with Edgar Chairez, which he also won. He lost to Charles Johnson somewhat recently, but I don't really see that as a horrible loss because Charles Johnson is on his own sort of run and he's really good. But I think Joshua Van's a very well-rounded fighter. I think he's amazing on the feet, and I think he's pretty good on the ground. I think he can hold his own on the ground. Rei Tsuruya, he had a really good win against Hernandez. That was a pretty impressive performance. He showed some really good ground game in that fight, but I think Josh Van will be able to handle that, and I think if it goes to the feet, I think Josh Van will sort of take that. My pick for this fight will probably be Josh Van. I don't think he's going to get a knockout. I think it's going to be a decision win. Alright, now moving on to the final fight on the prelims, we have Curtis Blaydes versus Rizvan Kuniev, and I cannot believe this fight is happening. I don't think Kuniev deserves this fight. I don't know how he got this fight. His only real win inside of the UFC was on the Contender Series, where admittedly he did get a knockout, but I mean, to be fighting number 5 Curtis Blaydes off a Dana White Contender Series win is absolutely insane to me. I also heard that he did get popped for being a drug cheat prior to this, so sort of a loss of respect there. I mean, listen, Curtis Blaydes, his most recent fight was fighting for the belt, well, interim belt against Tom Aspinall, and the fact that his fight after that is fighting some unranked Dana White Contender Series winner in Rizvan Kuniev is crazy to me. Yeah, Curtis Blaydes, I think he's just better in every department. Striking, I think he'll do better. Wrestling, I think he'll do better. I can very much see this fight going the way where Curtis takes him down, or not really takes him down, but just waits for him to sort of stumble or stagger, gets him up against the cage, drops him to the floor, and just rains down ground and pound on him. In fact, I very much see this going the same way it did with Almeida, minus like the shooting in and stuff, but I think once he gets him on the cage and sort of sits him down, I think he's going to rain elbows or punches down on him and finish him. So my pick for this fight will be Curtis Blaydes by round 2 KO. Alright, and now we're on the main card. Starting off the main card, we have King Green versus Mauricio Ruffy or Huffy. I've heard both. King Green, not the most amazing performance recently at 304. He lost to Paddy Pimblett in a pretty horrific fashion. He got put in a triangle and then got his arm broken. He got a win over Jim Miller at 300, but then he also lost to Jalin Turner shortly before that. And I think the thing with King Green is whenever he's fighting someone that has the potential to be in the top 10, or you could just imagine fighting in the top 10, he usually loses. Like, he is sort of a gatekeeper of the lightweight division in my opinion. I mean, him beating Miller, I don't think Miller was ever going to sort of make it into the top 10. Jalin Turner, lanky striker. This is where I worry with Mauricio Ruffy matchup. Jalin Turner, a very lanky striker, has the height, has the reach advantage, and he pieced him up on the feet, and then even on the ground just annihilated him. Moving on to Mauricio Ruffy, he has his most recent win over James Lontop. It wasn't a knockout, although I think most people will agree the size difference between both of them. Ruffy was fighting at a catch weight of 160, I think 165. His usual weight class being 155, the lightweight division. And Lontop just on the day just looked so much bigger than Ruffy. Although it was a dominant performance, I think he won all 3 rounds in a very convincing fashion. The win before that, Jamie Malarkey, which I don't really rate as much of a win, but he just dominated him, knocked him out within the first round. And I think that he's going to beat King Green. I think that his lankiness, his just proficiency when it comes to striking, I mean, as part of the Fighting Nerds, they're the biggest sort of gym coming up in the UFC, and I think that he's going to finish King Green. So my prediction for this fight will be Mauricio Ruffy by a round 2 finish. Next fight on the main card is Amanda Lemos versus Iasmin Lucindo. Amanda Lemos, she's been in the game for a while now. She's fought some really high comp. She lost to Jandiroba recently. She got submitted, but I don't really see that as a huge loss. Jandiroba's been on a roll recently, and I can see her maybe having one more fight before fighting for the belt. She actually beat Dern at 298, which I thought was really impressive. Outstruck her, and even the wrestling held her own pretty decently, which is impressive against Dern, who usually will out-wrestle her way to a decision. She lost to Weili when fighting for the belt. Not a huge loss, and I think if Weili can't knock her out with the striking, I don't think Iasmin Lucindo will be able to do it. Lucindo has some decent wins. She beat Marina Rodriguez, I think, via decision. She has wins over people like Poliana Viana, but at the end of the day, I don't think she's really fought any high-ranking opponents in the division. She hasn't really had a tough challenge at the level that Amanda Lemos is at, and I think Amanda Lemos's really advantage in this will be her experience. I think she'll stay calm, stay comfortable, and outstrike her, and even if it comes to the wrestling, I think that she'll handle her own, where the strikes will sort of add up and the wrestling wouldn't make much of a difference. So I think this fight is going the distance, and my pick for this fight will be Amanda Lemos by decision win. Alright, and the third fight up the main card and the last fight before the co-main, we have Jalin Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. Jalin Turner, he's been having a weird sort of streak recently. He pretty much beat Moicano at 300, you could argue. He knocked him down, and then for some reason, probably the $300,000 bonuses, decided to try and go for a walk-off KO. Moicano just popped back up again and then finished him via ground and pound, I think, in the second round. He beat Green very convincingly. In fact, he almost killed Green. And then I think he was winning against Hooker, and then Hooker had this comeback and beat him via split decision, but it was a pretty close fight, that one. He's good, but I think Ignacio Bahamondes, the streak he's been on recently, is just going to edge him over. He had an amazing knockout against Manuel Torres at the Sphere. That was a crazy fight. He got a head kick finish before that, and these two fights won in Performance of the Night bonuses. He lost to Ludwig Klein in 2023, but I think that was a different sort of Bahamondes than we're seeing now. In every fight since, he's looked just incredibly dominant, and he is a striking force to be messed with, and I think he's just better than Jalin Turner. They're both very lanky strikers. I think that's going to be something that Jalin Turner's not used to. Moicano and Green. Moicano wasn't really a striker. Green's a bit more stubby and short. Hooker is, but once again, that was a pretty close split decision loss. And I just think Bahamondes is, he's too much in to lose right now. My prediction will be Bahamondes by a round 2 KO. Alright, so now moving on to the co-main event. This was initially going to be Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker in a 5-round bout. Hooker had to pull out due to a hand injury during training, and it was looking for a bit like we weren't going to get a Justin Gaethje 313 co-main event. Until out of the shadow stepped Rafael Fiziev for the rematch. That's right, Justin Gaethje, Rafael Fiziev 2, the co-main event of 313. Gaethje has been on a bit of a weird streak. He beat Poirier to get the BMF belt via a nasty head kick knockout, but then proceeded to get knocked out by Max Holloway at 300 and lost the BMF. He's getting up there in age, and I think even he said himself that this is going to be sort of his last run at the belt before he retires and hands in the towel. Rafael Fiziev, he's been out for a while now. He got that nasty injury fighting Gamrot in 2023, and he hasn't really been back since. He said he's been training, and he said he's been waiting for an opponent, but I think Dana said that that wasn't the case, so I don't know what's been happening training camp wise. But prior to that Gamrot loss, Gaethje sort of derailed the hype train of Rafael Fiziev in that first fight. Granted, it was a close decision, but he sort of put a stop to this monster that was Fiziev at the time. Speaking of the rematch, I think it's going to go very similar this fight. In the original fight, Fiziev won the first round and then sort of slowed down in the second and third and let Gaethje sort of run off with those ones, and that took him to a decision win. I think it's going to be similar in this fight. I think Fiziev in the first couple of rounds is going to come out swinging hard, trying to get a knockout, and then he's just going to slow down, especially because he hasn't been training, or not as hard. He's been out with an injury. He's sort of got that ring rust, and I think in the third, fourth, and especially the fifth round, I think Gaethje's just going to slowly pick these points up by landing these massive power shots. He might even knock him down a few times, but I don't think he's going to get a knockout. Fiziev's really hard to knock out. He's got a really good chin on him. But I think, Gaethje's going to be landing more. He's going to be landing harder. The damage is going to show a lot more on Fiziev, especially in those later rounds. And I think Gaethje's going to run off with the decision. So my pick for this one is going to be Justin Gaethje by a decision. And now we move on to the main event. Alex Pereira defends his light heavyweight belt against Magomed Ankalaev. So Alex Pereira, all things are sort of pointing to him not really taking the fight as serious as a lot of people think he would be. He was seen in Melbourne hanging out with Drake, and apparently he's on the UFC 6 cover, which is not a good sign for those who know about the cover curse. And he just hasn't been posting much training footage to any of his social medias as of recent. Actually, recently he has started, but I mean, not much. But I think this is all a ploy. I think this is mind games. I don't think Alex Pereira is dumb enough to sort of give up and take his foot off the pedal now when he's fighting his toughest opponent, I think, in Magomed Ankalaev. Ankalaev, he's a really, really good striker. He sort of stood his own against Rakic. He's stood his own against people like Johnny Walker, who have a more unorthodox style. He's a really good striker. A lot of people say he's really good at wrestling. He's really good for the light heavyweight division, but he's not really known for his wrestling. A lot of people sort of associate him because he's from Russia with that Dagestani sort of sambo style. I don't really see it as much. In fact, Paul Craig submitted him in the last couple of seconds of round 5 when they fought. So, if you're being submitted by Paul Craig, I think you have some flaws in your wrestling game. But yeah, I think he is a serious striking threat to Pereira, and I think out of ego, like most of Pereira's opponents, he's going to try and put him out on his feet. How do I see this fight going? I think that Pereira is going to sort of wait out the first couple of rounds. He won't really go for a finish unless he sees the opportunity, like people like Yuri and Hill. He sort of saw these opportunities to finish early, so he went for them. But we saw with Khalil Roundtree that Pereira is more than comfortable with sort of waiting out those first couple of rounds, even losing the first 2 in the case of the Roundtree fight, I thought. Just to make sure that in those last couple of rounds he can get their pattern down and find these openings where he can jeopardize and sort of finish the fight. I do think this one's going to be a finish. I think round 4 or 5, around there, is going to be when Pereira's going to start sort of getting into his groove, sort of getting Magomed Ankalaev's techniques down, and he's going to find these counters and openings. And Magomed might even counter, sort of panic shoot in for a takedown. And I think in these situations, Pereira's just going to wait the round out on the ground. I don't think he's going to be too hasty to get up. And I think he'll take that round loss and then later in the round make up for it by finishing Ankalaev. So my prediction for this fight, I'm going to say that Alex Pereira is going to win, and I think he's going to do it by round 4 knockout. So that's it, everybody. Those are all my picks for UFC 313. Right now on the screen, I'm just going to have a collection of all my picks throughout this video in one place. Right below my predictions, I'm going to have my brother's predictions. Cam, he really likes the sport as well, and I guess it gives you something to compare me against. I'm going to keep track of how many I get right, how many I get wrong, how many sort of methods of victory I get correct, and I'll be sure to let you know those in the card breakdown video I'm going to release after the event happens. Overall, this is a really good event. My thoughts on the card are that it's going to be a banger. I mean, name value wise, we've got everyone here. We've got Pereira, we've got, well, Dan Hooker was supposed to be on it, we got Gaethje, we got so many fighters. I mean, the fact that Curtis Blaydes is the featured fight on the prelims says enough to sort of the star power behind this card. And I guess my final closing thoughts are Shama. See you guys later. Bye.